On ABC Radio Darwin and the Northern Territory, this evening, Australian Story. According to the OECD international testing, Australian students are lagging seriously behind their peers in other developed countries when it comes to maths. But there is one man who is determined to make a change. He is one of the most famous maths teachers in Australia. If you don't know him, his name is Eddie Wu, and he has become an internet sensation.
When I was at uni starting to become a teacher, I read a lot of research and articles about the nature of intelligence. And since graduating and teaching for a little while, I've had some thoughts about that, so I wanted to talk to you today about whether intelligence is fixed or fluid. The idea of fixed intelligence is there are basically smart people, basically dumb people, and a whole spectrum in between. But whatever you are, you more or less stay that way for your entire life. Now, educational researchers also talk about fixed types of intelligence, which means that people are born with an innate ability to understand certain things, but not others. And the idea of fixed intelligence is that those abilities are very hard to change. Fluid intelligence, on the other hand, is all about the idea that our intelligence can shift and change, not just subtly, but dramatically over time and given different stimuli. Now, this idea has gotten a lot of currency recently because of neurological research that has shown the brain isn't a physiologically static organ, which is what people thought of for a long time. Now, you might have heard of the term neuroplasticity, which refers to the brain's ability to develop new pathways and synapses in response to certain behaviors and environmental factors. Now, fluid intelligence, I think, is kind of like the Disney approach to mental ability, which is, you can become anything if you believe in yourself.
Fixed or fluid? It is just one of the many interesting topics that you can watch on the website Wutube. It's been created to help students initially who had cancer, but Eddie Wu discovered that many people wanted to be involved with Wutube. This afternoon on ABC Radio Darwin and the Northern Territory, your Australian Story star, no less, is Eddie Wu. Hello to you.
How are you going, Lyrella? Great to be with you.
Wutube, 38,000 subscribers and attracting more than 3.7 million viewers worldwide. That's an extraordinary number.
It's just shocking. It's the kind of number that makes your brain hurt, even as a maths teacher, and it's a bit difficult to wrap your head around just how many people now can have access to anything they want to learn just through, the phone in their pocket. It's really quite astonishing.
Share the reason why you wanted to start Wutube for a student with cancer.
Look, it was something that I wanted to do really deeply because when I was at school myself, my mother was diagnosed with cancer, and as anyone can imagine, or as anyone's experienced, it just sort of wreaked havoc on my entire educational time. And so I knew what it was like when your life just gets turned upside down by health issues. So when I had a student in one of my classes who was away from school for treatment and then away from school for recovery from his treatment, I realized that you just can't learn most subjects like that, but particularly mathematics. I'm sure a lot of people have had the experience where they've learned something, they thought, okay, this all makes sense, but then they missed something. There was some idea, whether it was like times tables or algebra or when they first started drawing graphs. And after that, if you didn't get that piece, the rest of it was just mystifying. It might as well have been Greek to you. Actually, it might have been literally Greek to you. And so I knew that it would be no help for this student just to say, look, off you go. I'm going to see you in 7 weeks, complete chapter 5, 6, and when you come back, hopefully we can piece the knowledge together. I knew that wouldn't work. So I thought, look, my phone is not that bad. I'm just going to prop it up on the table. You can watch these videos. You can keep up with us while you're, away from us. And that way you're actually getting a very similar classroom experience to what everyone else is having.
So ultimately what happened is with that particular student, they were able to keep up. And in the intervening period, more and more people started subscribing to your Wutube.
Well, I think people, for the first time, my own students who were still in the class at the time, they saw my phone perched up there in this very unusual way and thought, what's that about? And, it's a pretty normal experience. You don't have to be, seriously ill to miss school, to have excursions or extracurricular activities that take you away from class. And pretty rapidly, people realized this is actually something really valuable to us, that we can go back, we can review stuff that we learnt a long time ago, or any lesson that we missed, we can catch up. And it just sort of grew from there. I mean, people say, oh, why would people spend time learning something like maths when there's lots of entertaining stuff on the internet? I actually reckon that people don't really dislike maths so much as they dislike feeling stupid. You know, if there's any experience or subject that you're learning and it doesn't make you feel very smart, then you'll gravitate away from that. But if you have access to something that can, you know, give you the confidence and the competence to be able to answer questions and solve problems, then people want to get a hold of that. And so I think that's kind of how it spread really far.
What's interesting about spending some time with you this afternoon, Eddie, is the passion in your voice when it comes to maths and your enthusiasm to want to share the joy of maths with everybody. And so when you read about this OECD international testing and the fact that Australian students are lagging well behind their peers in other developed countries when it comes to mathematics, this is where your story comes to life, because it goes deeper than this initial idea that, oh, you're a maths teacher and you're just trying to teach people, because you actually at school didn't like maths.
Yeah, it definitely did not come naturally to me, that's for sure. You know, when we talked that clip before about fixed and fluid mindsets, that's a very personal thing to me, because when I was going through school, I could do maths, I sort of got it, but it just never, I would sit in a class. I have this very clear memory of the teacher standing up the front next to the chalkboard explaining something that was, you know, everyone around me was just kind of nodding in this knowing way, and the concept or the skill was completely opaque to me. And so I was always the student who had to work and sort of beat the textbook for hours to try and gain insight. And so it definitely was not a sort of, oh yeah, this is easy, this is natural. I very much gravitated towards the humanities, English and history and drama. So I actually think that part of my ability to teach maths comes from the fact that I've struggled. You know, I was told once, it's not hard for you to teach what it was hard for you to learn. If you've put in lots of time and thought to wrap your head around a concept that doesn't just, you know, click immediately for you, then you've got a lot more empathy for people who don't understand and for people who it doesn't come immediately to. So yeah, it's been a long journey, and it certainly wouldn't be where I expected to find myself, but I love what I do, and it's a great privilege to help students understand mathematics.
When you talk about that idea of it's not where you expected to be, that of course is because you are of an Asian background, immigrants growing up here in Australia, and mum and dad arriving here into the 70s having high expectations that of course you would go on to become a lawyer or a doctor. And I suspect becoming a teacher wasn't what they envisaged for you.
You're absolutely right. I don't know if there's anyone really who dreams of their children growing up and becoming a teacher. It's certainly a job which is, in today's society in Australia, is often quite thankless. I mean, one of the things that's made me very sad, the further I get into teaching, is the more I meet amazing educators who are so dedicated, who work behind the scenes, long hours, before school, after school, during, you know, so-called school holidays, putting in effort because they know it's worth it for their students and it'll make a difference for their learning and for their character. But those people often go by as unsung heroes and never thanked, never recognized for their efforts. And so for me, I think the fact that broader society, including my parents, didn't understand the value of education and of teachers in particular, the people who are driving education. For me, in some ways, that's driven me even more to plunge myself into this profession, this vocation, because our next generation needs it. They need the best educators and education they can get. So for me, it's absolutely worth it. Every single day that I come to work, I know that what I'm doing makes a difference for actual human beings who are standing right in front of me, and all the struggles are worth it.
On ABC Radio Darwin and the Northern Territory, with you this afternoon is Eddie Wu. He is your Australian Story tonight on ABC Telly at 8 o'clock, and it is an extraordinary story about maths and about how it can create change. And one way that Eddie has done that is through this Wutube that he created for one student who had cancer and now has gone on to have massive reach, over 3 million people. It's extraordinary just how many people are now watching it. With this OECD program for international student assessment, there was a test for 15-year-olds and it showed that Australia ranked at 25th of 72 participating in these sort of countries' mathematics tests. And that Australia is somewhere 28 months behind its peers. When you hear statistics like that, how does it make you feel?
I guess the first thing I'd have to say is, I am no official statistician, and I know that there's a huge amount of information that's gone into these benchmarks, these international tests, which is very complicated and difficult to disaggregate and unfold. And so, there's a very broad picture, which I suppose can be alarming when you look at it on the face of it. But at the same time, because I'm in the classroom and I know what students are learning and I know what their needs are from day to day, I guess I have my concerns because, we've got lots of work to do. We've got a challenging task in front of us with, science, technology, engineering, maths. Those STEM skills are becoming more and more important every day. But for me, I'm not worried. I mean, we've known for a long time that mathematics and science aren't easy. There was this great article that I read last year that was published about students' concept of what learning these subjects is like. And one of the headlines was, "Mathematics and science, popular until students realize they're hard." And for me to take students from that point where they lack confidence and view mathematics and science together as something which is quite intimidating, for me, it's a bit of a launch pad, really. It's an emphasis on the fact that, hey, this matters. It's not easy. We need our best people in the game, and we need to, as teachers and as parents, we need to bring our A game. I mean, my children are 3, 6, and 8, and I very keenly sense the challenge that they face with gaining a sense of their own confidence with dealing with these concepts that, let's remember, most people maybe don't actually realize that students and the maths that they learn in sort of year 8, 9, 10, a lot of it was viewed as really challenging, difficult concepts for even the best mathematicians of the day up to, say, 300 years ago. These are very difficult ideas. Our brains didn't evolve to wrap our heads around these abstract concepts. It speaks to how far we've come as a species. So for me, I just view it as a challenge. We have this immense privilege to be able to take crazy, groundbreaking ideas that are difficult to wrap your head around, but have so much value for humanity that, this is just a wake-up call for us to remind us this is important and this matters.
So it's interesting that you talk about your children and maths and imparting that to them. So I remember when I was in grade 4, starting at a new school, and we were introduced to algebra by the math teacher. And I remember at the time just looking at this initial concept going, I don't understand. I don't get it. I'm upset. It's beyond me. And I remember that part of my brain. I'm in grade 4. This is in the early 1980s, closing down and shutting down. And I can tell you right now in my mid-40s that I don't understand maths. I've never passed a maths test in my life and I have no confidence at it. And so then for me, trying to teach my 7-year-old, my 9-year-old and my 10-year-old about maths, it's a complete mystery to me. It's not something I want to know about at all. And so my question to you right now, Eddie Wu, why should I be interested in maths? What is the magic for you? Because I don't get it.
Sure, I can say 2 things to that. Firstly, why should it matter to us? Well, I think there's a really practical reason, which is that, just like a few centuries ago, it didn't matter whether people were literate or not. In fact, very few people were. And then the printing press was invented and it changed everything. Our world was just turned upside down by the ability to speak and communicate with people far, far away through this amazing tool of reading, which was only accessible to a very tiny subsection of the population once upon a time. But that's not true anymore. Today, literacy is a basic expectation of functioning in normal society. And numeracy, being able to wrap your head around the numbers and patterns and shapes that are all around us, the ability to read your bank mortgage statement and make sure, wait, am I getting ripped off or not? Making sure you can pay your bills on time, making sure that when you go to the shops you can understand you're getting a good deal. These are just little practical things which are just part of the warp and woof of everyday life. So I think the first answer that I have is that today's society really requires us to have a baseline understanding of numerical concepts that wasn't true once upon a time. And I haven't even begun to talk about all the technologies that we rely upon, how your credit card goes over the internet and it stays secure and you don't get sort of credit card fraud. How does that even happen? Well, an enormous amount of mathematics is how it happens. So I think that there's that first practical reason. But there's a second thing which actually speaks more deeply to me personally, which is that I guess I'd compare it to music. You don't have to learn to understand how music works. You don't have to know anything about rhythm or tone or how one piece of music is different to another, or how it sounds different when one person sings it versus a different artist. But if you don't understand those things, then you're missing out a huge part of what it is to be human. You're not able to access and appreciate a whole range of different things that make life richer. And I guess an example, my favorite example that I love to think of, is when it rains and, the water stops and the sun comes out and there's a beautiful rainbow in the sky. I think we often forget how amazing rainbows are because they're just part of reality. So we're like, well, that's normal. Why wouldn't it be? But when you think about it, like if you were to tell someone, hey, by the way, after the rain, there's this crazy, perfectly circular spectrum of colors that's just sitting in the middle of the air as if by magic. That's a crazy idea. Now, my question, and where mathematics comes into this, is why is that there? And why is a rainbow perfectly round? I mean, it's a semicircle if you look at it from the ground, but if you're up in the air, if you're lucky enough to be in a plane when it happens, you'll see it is a perfect circle. Why is that? How is it that a million raindrops are conspiring together to create this object of immense beauty in the air? And there's a wonderful little piece of circle geometry that tells us why. Now, do you need to know that? Well, you don't need to, but when you do, you can appreciate the world in a much deeper and richer way. And I love that mathematics gives us access to that.
Eddie Wu, you are conquering the fears of maths for me this afternoon. You are making it something that I might even be able to aspire to with my old brain.
Everyone can. Everyone can.
From fixed to fluid, I think, is the way you were talking about it before.
That's right.
And it is certainly fodder for the future. This evening, Channeling Mr. Wu. It premieres on Australian Story, 8 o'clock this evening with Eddie Wu. It will make you want to get back into maths, or at least think about it a little bit more. Eddie, thank you so much for sharing. Can't wait to see your story tonight.
It's a great pleasure. Thanks for your time.